Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? Not me. No way. No how. Can't do it. Let's see what folks are saying. Good morning. It's Courtney, Fellowship of Oddballs. Nice to see you back, Courtney. Hope you're doing well. Let me see what our folks in Rumble are saying and making sure we're live on Rumble for the beautiful Rumble live chat. Wait a second here. Says I'm not live on Rumble, which is not a good thing. Oh no, now it says I'm live. Okay, there y'all are. Nice to see you all. There we go. Hello from Colorado Springs, John C919 in the house. French fry with a thumbs up. Chef Zero. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit grown inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies, Romans 8:23. Indeed, blessings, beloved Bampians. Chatelet escaped the Matrix. Block number 939,008. 65,440 U.S. trash tokens. Good morning from California, Great Awakeners. Glad to be here with you all. Charlosky says, good morning, Awakeners. Another boring day. So boring. Good morning, Nolan and Great Awakening crew, and happy Monday. Latest video. We've got Jack2K who made it to sunrise at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden for a morning walk at the Tennis Paradise. That sounds like a lot of fun. Hassan, good morning. Chatelet, barely 45, marked safe from internet doomers. Today, we're not going to be dooming here. No way. MMK007, what's up, Awakeners? We're in the house. JJ Fox, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. Guten Tag. Lance 2002 says, here we go. Indeed, we are so lucky we have Bitcoin on planet Earth. We sure are indeed. 3, 2, 1, showtime. Count time. That's this time. Sunrise confirmed in New Jersey. Says escape the Matrix. Good morning, folks. 72 Jet, you're alive. Let's do it live. We're doing it live. We're having a great time indeed. Like we said, we have a massive sunrise on our hands. Bigger and better than yesterday. But I gotta tell you, I am not opening up the windows because the breezy air has brought the kites. I'm being inundated and swarmed with kites. I could not enjoy my yard yesterday. I had 4, 5 kites maybe up there. I'm completely drowning in kites right now. I have 2 particularly loud and meddlesome ones. We had a very stormy and windy night last night. It eliminated some of the kites, but my kite update is I want the drones that are at war in Iran and the Middle East to come here and prosecute a war against the kites. I want a drone armada. I'm telling you, we talk all about peaceful things here all the time. We're all about small government and separating government and state. But I'm telling you, if I boil it down, I become super totalitarian, absolute authoritarian when it comes to weed whackers, leaf blowers, and kites with noisemakers. I'm a 100% fascist when it comes to that. Sorry to disappoint you if you're hoping for something beyond fascism here. Everything about Bitcoin is just because the world won't handle my complete totalitarian take on what to do about noisy things. The best option other than that is Bitcoin and separating money and state and completely disarming the world and all that stuff. So Bitcoin is literally my plan B. My plan A is just not palatable or practical, but it's my true politics when it comes to the noises. Sorry, guys. Give me the nukes. Give me the nukes. Give me the surveillance. Who's planning kites? Get them. Give it all to me. Be not overcome with kites, but overcome kites with Bitcoin. Exactly. Do people fly those for fun or to drive everyone insane? Thought he was talking about people flying kites. I am. Kites are the birds. Drone kite killer. Evil kites. Kill them all. Exactly. No, I'm talking about kites. Yeah, they do it to annoy people. It's a thing. They put these noisemakers on them that absolutely drive me and many others insane. They leave them; they'll be up for 4 or 5 days. I don't mind people flying kites. And even if they did make noise, if it was just the afternoon, sure. But they'll leave. This kite here has been 4 days, like at 4 days of a nonstop, louder than a weed whacker, louder than a weed whacker, louder. Like I can hear it now inside. Now, if I close both of these doors, and you know the fan is on, I don't hear it, but I need to take refuge in the house mostly because of the noise of the kites. In fact, it's so bad when I walk away from here, the kite, you can still hear it for 300-400 yards away still because of how loud it is. It's only when I get close to the sea and the noise of the trees on the shoreline and the waves actually drown it out. That's how loud we're talking about here. I mean, it comes into homes. If your home isn't like most of the houses outside of the walls of my house are really thin clapboard or whatever, and there's no insulation or anything like that here, of course, those people must hear it in their house. So I can't imagine how torturous it is for some people. Some people just don't care, but I'm not one of those people. So that's what's going on. So we are indeed talking about all-out war on kites, weed whackers, leaf blowers, you name it. I am talking about kites. Really, no one's heard of such a thing. There's nothing going on. How about a parabolic mirror to do some sizzling? Yeah, I've thought about that. 4 solid days of annoying buzzing all day. Yeah, oh my God, exactly. Is it legal to fly a drone to defeat the kites? You can do it. They don't let me bring drones in. People have to smuggle them here. They crush glass and glue it to the kite strings in order to have so hold on. In Brazil, they crush glass and glue it to the kite string in order to have kite fights. Yes, they do that here too. They do kite fights. Have you caught anyone doing it? Yes, Charlosky, I have. But I created a few years ago, I thought my tactic would be to put bounties out, but you know what happens with bounties? You get people flying the kites coming over trying to collect the bounty, so that doesn't work. No, might have just stopped. Sometimes they just run out of steam and fall. What you need is some rain clouds that come and saturate them, but they use fishing line to keep them up there. So the line, it's a lot harder to attack the line itself. My drone strategy is now the reason why our drones are illegal in Barbados is because there's a lot of rich people here and they banned them years ago so that you couldn't spy. And it's like British tabloid people too. So they were aware of the drones for the tabloid stuff a long time ago. So drones are heavily policed here. They're very difficult to get into the island. You'll get in big trouble if you bring one. And to me, it's just not, that's why I haven't brought one. It just hasn't been worth the risk. I've been trying to pick one up here. The only one I've ever got didn't have the range because you got to get up there to get the kites down. And they're weirdly high enough that you still hear them. So I don't understand it. It is torture. It's a form of torture. Anyway, we'll talk deploy direct energy weapons on kites. That's what I want. Exactly. But the parabolic mirror thing sounds like a good idea. Yeah, shoot them. But drones, I think, are the best way. I want the drones here. That's the only way I think I can deal with them. I have a neighbor who's a pilot who's just about to get his drone license, and I'm telling him that's a business that he can start running, is drone removal in neighborhoods. That way you cut out the people who might be putting them up. So the person who calls you has to pay for it. That means you got to make sure the incentives are aligned. Otherwise, you're going to get all the kids are just going to know they can get money from you and will fly a kite to get money. So it's not going to work. So there you go, everyone. So indeed, we got the sunrise. We got Bitcoin running. We're doing great other than the kites. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. More drone warfare. I wish you could hear it once. Like I tried to record it. It didn't quite come through because of the amount of other noise like trees and everything. But you really wouldn't. It's louder than a weed whacker. It's louder than a weed whacker. It's a real problem. A real problem. All right, folks. Speaking of real problems, let's find out what's going on with sunken civilizations. Let's find out what the news is saying about sunken civilizations. It's not going to be good. Oh no, everyone. Irreversible loss. How climate change is threatening Europe's sunken civilizations. Guys, they've been there for thousands of years under the water, but now I guess the water has gone up a degree and it's too hot. They couldn't survive thousands of years underwater. But now, oh no, it's hot. It's hot and it's acidification. Oh, it's too acidic. Oh no, cultural heritage, our cultural heritage that we haven't seen ever and is underwater and hidden from you is now threatened by the decay from acidity. Oh no, guys, we might not find out what our history was like. But what about looking in the acorns, you say? And what about when we found out that if you look in the ice, you can find out what happened 25,000 years ago? That's another, that's different. It's not the same as this. We're losing things. Acid. The acid in the water now is too high and it's ruining our cultural heritage. Oh no. And we got more crises. If that wasn't enough for Europe, a crisis in the Alps, Airbnb, climate change, and Americans. The mountains resort towns have reached an inflection point, facing changes that threaten their cultures and even survival, as demand for short-term rentals reshapes the landscape. Guys, they have Airbnb in the Alps now. How will the richest mountain region in the world survive? They're making more money now. Oh no. What are we going to do? It's a crisis in the Alps. Short-term rentals. They never said anything about mass immigration, but now Americans are coming to ski. They're coming to ski, and it's hot out. They came to ski, plus it's hot, and they just had the Olympics, and it was hot for some days. They opened their borders for Syria. They opened their borders for North Africa. But now we've got Americans headed to the mountains to ski. The Syrians didn't like skiing. The Algerians didn't ski. The Senegalese didn't come to the ski hills. But the Americans are coming and they want short-term rentals. And it's hot. Oh no. That's what's going on there. We get this news. This is a great headline. This is just one of those ones you just say it. I don't have to add anything. This is what's going on. Government withholding data that may link the COVID jab to excess deaths. It's just going to leave that one. That's perfect. You don't have to add anything to that headline. Oh no, the Globe and Mail. This is what we get from Canada. Opinion. Donald Trump isn't the president of peace. He's the most dangerous man on the planet. The most dangerous man on the planet. He's not the president of peace. No, he's the most dangerous man on the planet. It's from the Globe and Mail. It must be, that headline must be spoken in that voice. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. And of course, as you know, Khomeini died, right? The leader of Iran. I say Iran, but people say Iran. Right, he's dead, and this is what we found out. He's actually, with his white bushy beard and easy smile, the Ayatollah Khomeini cut a more avuncular figure in public than his perpetually scowling, but much more revered mentor. And he was known to be fond of Persian poetry and classic Western novels, especially Les Miserables. And, I didn't know Santa Claus got caught up in this war. I thought that was only going to be involved in the Greenland issues. But no, Santa Claus also, according to the Washington Post, involved in what's going on in Iran. And this one's great too. The great Scott Adams will live in perpetuity with the great disgraced headlines, because from now on, anytime the fake news writes something like Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, hardline cleric who made Iran a regional power, dies at 86. Isn't it funny that Scott Adams' joke is going to live in perpetuity? And remember, he described himself as a disgraced cartoonist and set this joke up for years. So kind of perfect that anytime one of these folks dies, you're going to get this. And this is just an oldie but a goodie, right? Now that we know that the Ayatollah is gone and the hardline cleric who made Iran a regional power is out of here. Let's go back to what the New York Times wrote about the original Ayatollah, trusting Khomeini, an op-ed from a Princeton expert who opined, having created a new model of popular revolution based for the most part on nonviolent tactics, Iran may yet provide us with a desperately needed model for human governance. Thank you, New York Times. Just great stuff from the New York Times. Hard to beat that kind of quality journalism there. Indeed, as everyone knows, there was a weekend worth of war. Trump attacked Iran, and the United States attacked Iran on Friday night after the markets closed. Trump's typical tactic. And so that's what's going on here. One second. Make sure I can still. So there we go. Oh, I'm getting buzzed here in my chat. Okay. We okay. We're okay. I was getting buzzed in the production room. Just a second to make sure I got everything coming in. There we go. Okie dokie. Whoops. No, I'm not. Okay. None of this is what I wanted. That's what I wanted. There we go. Now we're good. I had to get on my production channel. So, indeed, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff over the weekend. Now, got to remember tons of fake videos, right? Just an extraordinary amount of fake videos out there. We warned you for a long time that this was incoming, very difficult, takes a long time to sift through what's real and what's fake. But what we did see some cool ways of viewing this conflict. So first up, we had AI and public data recreated a 4D God's eye view of the Iran strikes in the first 24 hours. So, as we begin today, just letting you know that while things are becoming more difficult, they're also becoming more human scaled in the sense that with the public data available alone, we're getting way more visibility into this stuff. And so this is a pretty interesting little video that just showed what happened over the weekend. And let me get the audio to make sure that's up. No, that's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. This related, and just amazing to see these tools become available and this kind of literacy in conflict and this kind of data become publicly available. Completely different than anything I've ever seen and quite amazing. And I think it's going to help us have, in the end, as worried as we are about all of these disinformation tactics and the sludge coming into the newsfeed constantly and the ability to create fake images. We're also experiencing a upgrade in our own ability to navigate and share impactful or truthful information. So we'll see. It's a fight. It's not going to be easy, but indeed, the tools available to the individual becoming more and more powerful. So today, what we're going to do is take what we know, and there's not a ton you can go on, but there's enough for us. And we're going to do our best to track, first of all, what's going on. Then we're going to look at what the American strategies are. Then we're going to compare them with the Iranian strategies. And we should be able to get to some point where we know or can at least predict, not with tons of confidence, but we'll be able to make a prediction about where this is headed by the end. So, first up, I have this lady here. She's not very reliable in other ways. First up, you guys are all Bitcoiners. She's not. So remember what we say from the Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management. If you're not a Bitcoiner, you are automatically there's no reason to even continue. You're an NPC. So, but she does have a pretty good play-by-play here. I have checked her whole feed filled with terrible predictions and very easily persuaded and very easily distracted analyst in general. She'd be one of these people who I'd say has been crying about World War III 4 or 5 times already this year, or since Trump became president. So it's one of those people. But the play-by-play she provides here for day 1 and day 2, pretty good. So we'll go through it. Iran's. So have you seen all these videos, right? And just to give you guys a perspective, for me, I've been watching a lot of these for the weekend as well. The attacks in Dubai are somewhat personally, I'm somewhat personally affected by it. I've been there 6 times in the past 2 years. And just the other day, I drove by that Fairmont hotel. So that was one of the hotels struck this week. Apparently, American soldiers took refuge in a series of hotels, and those are the ones that, when they left their bases, those are the ones that have been targeted. It was not the hotel I was at on the Palm was pretty close to that. So, as well as a few of the other residential towers where folks have been hit, all sort of in areas I spend time in, and then the airports as well, of course, as you all saw. So here's what this lady, Patricia Marins, I do not recommend following her, but I do like the 2 days worth of notes that she put together here. So she says, Iran's retaliation larger than expected, but Israel maintains firepower. That was the first day. So this would be the Saturday version of what happened. The U.S., lacking the range of carrier-based airstrikes, limited itself to launching Tomahawk missiles based on the 2 different videos, both showing more than 20 Tomahawks launched. I estimate the 10 to 20% of its Tomahawk inventory in the first day, hitting dozens of targets in Iran. The Israeli attacks were even more aggressive, with 2 major waves on the first day, striking over 200 targets in Iranian territory. However, all strikes were launched from Iraqi airspace, indicating some continued Israeli caution regarding Iran's air defenses. Iran is seeking to eliminate the American ANTPY-2 radars, but these structures are highly mobile. The U.S. crews able to relocate more than once a day. To locate them, Iran would need Chinese assistance and considerable agility. Both Israel and the U.S. heavily invested in drone operations for terrain monitoring to hunt for Iranian missile launchers. At least 2 large-scale launchers were identified and destroyed. There are still no reports of naval combat, but that was Saturday. There have been since. Apparently, Iran has 30 warships, and they remain largely intact, as does the entire U.S. fleet, which is staying well back in the Arabian Sea. On the first day, several strikes targeted mountain base exits to obstruct and delay the movement of Iranian launchers. Iranian radars were also hit, though in limited numbers. Iran has improved its guerrilla tactics for radars, which may be helping. Israel likely also were known silo coordinates. I see Israel repeating tactics from the last 12-day war. On the Iranian side, the focus was on the US bases in Gulf countries. At least 6 to 8 bases are under heavy bombardment, and I calculate as damage already in the billions of dollars, given that the Qatar base alone costs 10 billion US trash tokens. Air defenses at these bases were largely exhausted on the first, with new Patriot batteries still operational and showing low efficiency. As some footage demonstrates, Iran also deployed an ANFSP, FPS, I don't know, some kind of radar in Qatar, and a radome in Bahrain, which probably housed a high altitude radar or SATCOM system, both high value assets. Overnight, Iran is expected to maintain the missile pace, focusing on Israel and additional US bases. I believe Iran will launch a 100 long-range missiles during this period. This is a protracted conflict. On the first day, the Strait of Hormuz was already closed. Yeah, the Americans closed it, as we had predicted here, and it has a strong potential to drag in other Gulf countries. On the first day, everything has unfolded as we anticipated over the last 15 days, she says. Here's her day 2 stuff. She says Israel decimates Iranian installations. Iran retaliates unprecedentedly overnight. Israel and the U.S. have been relentlessly bombing Iranian territory on the second day of the war, launching strikes primarily from Iraqi and Saudi airspace. Approximately 1,000 targets have been hit in Iran, including air bases and bunkers. The Iranian Navy was also targeted, with 3 to 4 ships sunk. It's worth noting that one of these vessels was not that only one of these vessels was modern. The others date back to the 1960s. The hunt for Iranian missile launchers continues, with Israel striking several mobile launchers and anti-aircraft units daily. This is an extremely arduous task, as estimates from the military balance suggest Iran may possess up to 500 mobile launchers and 100 SHORAD systems. In the second day, Iran decided to strike 5 bases / airports being used by U.S. Israel forces all at once. The Saudi Prince Sultan Air Base was hit by multiple ballistic missiles, with several reports of smoke rising. Similarly, Iraq's Ain al-Assad base was targeted, but nothing compared to the intensity of the attacks on Ebril Air Base in northern Iraq and Ben Gurion in Israel, which came under several balloons overnight. And do you know what the biggest problem is? Iranian missiles are slipping through Israeli and American air defenses like a hot knife through butter. Yesterday and today, videos where launchers fire up to 9 or more interceptors in an attempt to down a single Iranian missile, often with little success. Retaliation against U.S. bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and UAE continued on the second day, mainly using drones. As I mentioned yesterday, Iran has proven that the war is only just beginning. It targeted Israeli cities with modern missiles that disperse sub-munitions during reentry, significantly expanding the affected areas. These missiles had never been used before combat, showing that Iran is now deploying its most advanced systems, which are also far more resilient to interceptors. At the current rate, interceptors will run out soon and panic. Well, this is where she starts to go wrong, so I'm not going to read her predictions because they're not great. She says there's enormous pressure on leaders of both countries to seek a ceasefire. I believe that if Iran refuses a ceasefire, both Israel and the U.S. will push for Gulf countries to enter the war. So those are her predictions, which we'll not bother with. I just wanted her play-by-play. I will be giving my own predictions based on a few other predictions. I do not find her to be very credible at all. Just her play-by-play. But indeed, the specter, I guess you can say, of the other Arab countries getting hit so much does play a role in this. So Sightbringer has a prediction based on Iran and the attack on Iraq, saying this is the 10th country that Iran has attacked since Friday. And Sightbringer says Iran is flailing and trying to drag everyone down with it. They're losing control of the main game, so they are starting side fires everywhere to make the world beg for a ceasefire. That is what striking Iraq is. It is a strategy to make the conflict uncontainable. They cannot stop the air campaign. They cannot protect their leadership layer. They cannot guarantee internal coherence, so they reach for the only lever left that still works: chaos. Iraq is the easiest place to manufacture chaos because it is already a contested map. Hit something there, and you trigger militia reactions, political paralysis, and uncertainty about who's next. That spreads fear across the Gulf and spikes the cost of basing, shipping, and doing business. This is also aimed at the Gulf hosts. Iran wants the UAE and Saudi thinking, if this keeps going, we lose stability, capital, and control. That is the pressure point. They want those governments to lean on Washington to stop. The truth is this: when a regime is cornered, it stops optimizing for victory and starts optimizing for survival through intimidation. That means wider targets, more reckless risk, and higher probability of a catastrophic mistake. So, yes, this is escalation. It's desperation escalation. It is Iran trying to make the war feel too expensive to finish. And it's playing with fire because every new country struck shrinks their diplomatic oxygen and hardens the coalition into dismantling them. I think that's a pretty accurate take from Sightbringer. Moving forward, I think it's also important to talk about what happened in the past 36 hours as well with those partners. Because to me, the biggest story so far that is coming out of this is that indeed the architecture of peace that Trump has put in place, the Abraham Accords, are working. And Michael Knowles points out here, viewed in conjunction with the Abraham Accords, it's difficult to deny that Trump has a better grasp on grand strategy than any president in our lifetimes. And indeed, that's what it looks like, that the Abraham Accords have flipped and engaged, that you hear Saudi and you hear UAE and you hear Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait, and I'll show others, Syria, even Syria, who's normally backed by Iranians. When you see all of this infrastructure flip into place, you start to see a lot about the timing for this event, and that the Board of Peace and other such architecture were important to get in place first. Now, there's no mistaking it, right? This is a regime change war of some form or another, but not the same as a regime change war that America conducted in Iraq 20 something years ago. It looks different. Indeed, Trump said yesterday that the potential candidates that would have led Iran instead of the Ayatollah are dead, and that the preferred candidates are gone, but they do have a concept of regime change and what goes into it. So here's Halpern, who was at the White or at Mar-a-Lago for the past couple of days. And I'm going to play his audio here because it's an interesting interview. And here we go. He's saying here that after spending a few hours, he came away thinking why he's doing it. And indeed, he's here to eliminate the Iranian threat and to usher in a golden age.
Okay. If I leave you with no other thought from this hour we spent together, Donald Trump is doing this, I'm quite certain,
This guy, Mark
because he
Halpern's
doesn't
great, by the
want
way.
to have the Iranian threat, terror, ballistic missiles, nuclear. He doesn't want to have it around on his watch. He didn't stop it on his first term, and he watched all of his predecessors do basically nothing effective to stop Iran. That is why Donald Trump is doing this. I am quite certain. Now, you may not like the fact that he didn't consult with Congress. You may not like the fact that it was a war of choice. You may question the timing. You may question some of the tactics. But I think you'd be making a mistake if you questioned what he's trying to do here. Okay? What he's trying to do is not end his presidency with Iran as a threat to the world, to Israel, to the Middle East, to the United States. Okay? I'm quite confident that that's true. So you can go on MS Now or Heather Cox Richardson or Twitter, and you can read people speculating about why he's doing it. But I don't believe they're correct. Now, I want to quote one thing right off the top here that you might say could undermine a lot of the whole program. From Neil Ferguson, who writes now for the Free Press, one of the smartest people I've ever met, truly. And Neil wrote a long essay about this invasion, this military action. And just one sentence, if you put up, please, that 130. It is a foolish commentator who attempts to pass definitive judgment on a major military operation while it is still underway. I'll read it again. It is foolish. It is a foolish commentator who attempts to pass definitive judgment on a major military operation while it is still underway. Neil Ferguson, writing in the Free Press. Neil's correct, and I don't want to be foolish. I don't want Neil to think I'm foolish. So I'm going to not pass definitive judgment. It's going pretty well so far. 3 Americans have died. Some Israelis have died. It's not perfect. There might have been a terrorist attack linked to the response in Austin, Texas. It's not perfect. War is never perfect. But it's gone pretty well. And I'll talk about the ways I think it's going well in just a moment. But I do not want you to think that we know where this goes.
And indeed, by the way, if you guys are aware, Niall Ferguson, big Bitcoiner. I've had him at my events several times. He actually launched an algorithmic stablecoin years ago, and was working not far away from the Terra Luna collapse, if anyone was wondering. Now, here's the most interesting line of inquiry, and we get this from the Promethean Action Framework, but here you've got Sightbringer also reiterating the Promethean Action Framework. So what you heard from Niall Ferguson passing judgment and this whole idea of getting people to believe the cost of the war is too much and that it's time to sue for peace and have a ceasefire. And you see a little bit of Trump's motivation about why he's doing this and what the goals are. You hear Mark Halpern predict what's going on, or at least say in his own limited predictions what he thinks is an important way to frame this. Now, and Niall Ferguson, a British fella, giving his predictions indeed. Still early, but here from Sightbringer, we see the Islamic regime is begging for the UK to get involved. I don't understand the strategy. This comes from open source intel, because indeed, Islamic regime has been begging for the UK to get involved, which is why Keir Starmer's had to say, we're not involved. But Sightbringer says the following: Iran wants the UK involved because the UK is a brake pedal. They are losing the military layer and they know it, so they are trying to move the fight into the only domain where they still have leverage: Western politics. London has two things for Tehran. It legitimizes a negotiation track and it slows decision velocity. More committees, more procedures, more talk, more off-ramps. That buys time. Time is survival. They also want to widen the coalition so the coalition fractures. The US and Israel can stay on the gas for weeks. Europe tends to splinter under oil spikes, terror risk, and duration fatigue. The UK is the bridge that can pull Washington towards a diplomatic ceiling if the economic pain gets loud enough. Iran does not want the UK as a full combatant. Iran wants the UK in the room and in the chain, mediator on paper, participant by entanglement. This is also why Hormuz matters. Iran cannot beat jets with the jets. They can beat jets with headlines and prices. Oil up, shipping paused, political pressure rising. In that environment, the UK becomes the voice that says, stop before the spirals. This is exactly what Tehran wants. Bottom line, Iran is trying to survive by forcing an argument inside the West. And so investigating this British component is important. We've seen it many times. Here's Susan Kokinda's colleague, Barbara Boyd, talking about it this weekend. And let me know if the audio is coming through. Let me fast forward it just a little to where she gets to the history of these engagements.
Free opportunity.
Let me get to it. I should have had it up earlier. Where the heck was it? Where the heck was it? I forget.
The City of London sets global oil prices. Mark Curtis documents how the British and the CIA paid the Ayatollah Khashoggi, who was a man who was literally in the 20th century, UAN. A prophet.
There we go.
He had purchased exclusive oil to understand what Trump.
Make sure the audio is coming through. Make sure the audio is coming through. Let me know if it's coming through, and I will.
Just struck. You need to understand what Iran actually is in the global power structure. And that story begins in 1908. In that year, a British speculator named William Knox D'Arcy struck oil in southwest Persia. He had purchased exclusive extraction rights from the Persian Shah for a pittance, just 16% of profits, and with no Iranian allowed to audit the books. From that single concession, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born. It later became the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Today, you know it as British Petroleum, BP. Winston Churchill, as First Lord of the Admiralty, called it, quote, a prize from fairyland beyond our wildest dreams. And he meant it. The British government bought a 51% controlling stake in 1914. The Royal Navy ran on Iranian oil. Britain's entire standard of living in the first half of the 20th century was subsidized by wealth extracted from Iran. In 1950, Abadan had become the world's largest refinery. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company controlled all oil in Iran, while Iranian workers lived in shanty towns without running water. Think about that. The same empire that people think of as a quaint historical artifact was literally powered by Iranian oil, and the Iranians got almost nothing. So when Iranian nationalists finally rose up and elected Mohammad Mossadegh as prime minister in 1951, a man who nationalized the oil company for his own people, what happened? The British and the CIA overthrew him in 1953. Operation Ajax, they called it. They installed the Shah as their puppet. And who did they use on the ground to create the chaos for the coup? The Muslim Brotherhood, the same organization Trump designated as terrorists just weeks ago. Mark Curtis documents how the British and the CIA paid the Ayatollah Khamenei, who was Khomeini's own mentor, for street violence during the uprising. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When the Shah outlived his usefulness, what happened? The British and Americans acquiesced to Khomeini's revolution in 1979. One puppet replaced another. The Muslim Brotherhood's ideology became the scaffold for Khomeini's theocratic state, its belief system. And the backward system of constant war between Israel, the Arab states, and Iran has been profitable for the City of London each time it has happened. The City of London sets global oil prices.
So think about it for a second, and I've been tracking the Muslim Brotherhood on this show for years, and I've many times mentioned that the history of the Muslim Brotherhood, especially its infiltration of the Gulf states and the oil kingdoms, is a really important frame because the oil kingdoms didn't have much history in the sense that they didn't have educators, they didn't have a bunch of literate people, they didn't have PhDs, they didn't, when they found oil, and even today, when you meet a Arab from the Mediterranean region, if you meet a Lebanese or Egyptian, they'll say, "Oh, those Johnny come lately, nouveau riche, no history Arabs," and there's kind of a resentment there, of course, because of the kind of wealth that these countries have experienced in the past few years versus Lebanon and the misery they've experienced. So what happened was Zawahiri, and I read The Looming Tower, so sort of I don't know, I haven't read it in years, but I remember reading it 20 years ago. And when I read that book, it's by the Lawrence Wright, the same guy who wrote Going Clear, a kind of expose that took down Scientology in America. He wrote the book The Siege, or the movie The Siege. If you remember The Siege, it was a Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis movie that came out in the 90s. And it actually, because he just chose Iranian terrorists as his enemy, it created this whole fallout that got him interested. So when 9/11 happened, he moved to Saudi Arabia to investigate it. So the book, The Looming Tower, is a history in the end of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Zawahiri, who was behind the Muslim Brotherhood, what you can see is when the British were leaving the area after World War II, they made sure that the Muslim Brotherhood would be used as this theatrical prop, and they started attacking, for example, cinemas. Any Western hand, any sign of Western involvement in Cairo was a target. And they ended up taking control of the radio stations, and that's where they got control of the education. And so when these Gulf states finally had money, the Muslim Brotherhood was the infiltration of this Iranian globalists, perpetual Muslim conflict narrative supply chain. That's where they came from. And they were the ones who actually raised bin Laden and through his schools and things like that, because the Arabs just didn't have the school infrastructure. So they imported it from the older countries like Cairo, like Egypt, like Lebanon. And, you know, to this day in Lebanon, it's you go to the Middle East, you go to Dubai, all the big hospitality folks, all the big restaurant managers, they're all Lebanese. A generation ago, all of the big teachers were Egyptian, and they came in through Muslim Brotherhood connections. That's how they got a lot of this stuff aligned with Iranians. So Iran was part of a conscious narrative supply chain that affected the Middle East as well. And the connections to Britain and British Petroleum and the city are exactly as Susan Boyd has described. And here the Observer says, for those crashing out and unable/unwilling to understand the Trump administration rationale here, over the last 125 years, the British Empire has maintained a strategic stranglehold on Middle East through a calculated policy of geopolitical and financial destabilization. Operating on the imperial maxim of geopolitics and divide and rule, British policymakers have systematically manipulated religious and ethnic tensions to prevent the emergence of sovereign industrialized nation states in the region. The primary mechanism for this destabilization was the artificial redrawing of Middle Eastern boundaries following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Through the secret Sykes-Picot Accord and the subsequent Treaty of Sèvres, the British and French carved up the region into colonial mandates, ensuring that countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine were designed with built-in ethnic and religious conflicts. To manage this volatile arrangement, British intelligence utilized operatives like T.E. Lawrence and Aubrey Herbert as specialists to steer diverse Middle Eastern proxy movements and keep the region in a chronic state of shipwreck. Many people, myself included, believe that Israel was created for these purposes of drama and a theater and stage. And, you know, it's why when I talk to the various sheikhs and princes that I spend time with in the Middle East, who are all ready to forgive and forget about Israel, but they still have questions like, why, you know? And I'll tell them all the time that in the end, when you see all the details and when you see all of this, you'll find that Israel is probably one of the biggest victims of all of this stuff, that the divisions inside of Israel mimic the same divisions we have in America. They have a woke left, they have globalists, they have small nation state sovereignists. They have many of the same problems that you'll find, and it's not some unified Israel thing. You know, guys like Epstein were helping Mossad, but one side of Mossad, the globalist side that's attached to London and the globalists in America as well. So it's transnational, but none of these countries, like America, is not unified when it comes to this global psychological and economic war, but nor is Israel. And so most of these countries are divided on these similar lines. The creation of modern Middle East borders and states was intended to serve as a perpetual irritant, keeping local populations at each other's throats as pawns in a much larger imperial game. Iran, historically known as Persia, has been a central target of the British imperial designs. As early as 1907, King Edward VII orchestrated the Anglo-Russian Entente, which explicitly divided Iran into spheres of influence and neutralized its autonomy to check rival powers. Financial warfare was weaponized alongside diplomacy. For instance, in 1911, the British used a major loan to Persia using the nation's own opium revenues as collateral, effectively hooking the state into colonial debt. The British oligarchy almost, just a second, the British oligarchy also maintained control over Iran's vast resources through allied institutions like the British Bank of the Middle East. Following World War II, the British desperately sought to retain their grip on Middle Eastern oil reserves to underwrite their financial empire. When figures like Italian leader Enrico Mattei attempted to negotiate fair, independent energy deals with the Middle East nations, including Iran, the British Foreign Office viewed him as a mortal threat to their colonial relationships and oil control. Mattei was ultimately assassinated in a plot with heavy British fingerprints. Today, the enduring conflicts in the Middle East, including the hostility between Iran and Israel, are the direct outgrowths of this old European strategy of divide and rule. Modern globalist factions aligned with British banking and intelligence networks have continued to stoke these proxy wars to prevent Eurasian economic integration by hyping threats like the Shia Crescent and weaponizing sanctions. These forces aim to keep Iran isolated and the region chaotic. The perpetual threat of Iranian nuclear enrichment has served as a convenient boogeyman to justify endless intervention and keep the military-industrial complex funded. The British and their allies understand that if major regional powers were allowed to stabilize and independently develop their oil infrastructure, such as the massive rail and energy corridors currently being built by Russia and China through Iran, the City of London's financial control over global energy markets would collapse, end British meddling, restore order to the region, which is what I think is actually happening. And here we can see Majid Nawaz saying the same thing. The entire world is unifying against the Islamic theocracy in Iran. Sunni Muslims will be at the forefront. The religious clerics in Tehran have overplayed their hand. Keep watching. And indeed, it looks like, just like I said, you've got Syria under the leadership of Ahmad al-Shara condemns Iran, not the U.S. and Israel, over the regional escalation, denouncing Tehran's retaliation against U.S. bases while ignoring U.S.-Israel strikes. Of course, he was put in place to do that when it comes time. David Marcus, who I love, Blue Box Dave, saying, as Rubio has made clear, Trump's goal is to transform the global order to America's advantage. Both the Venezuela and Iran actions undercut Russia and China, who look powerless as their allies are knocked off. Trump is thinking very, very big. And indeed, you can see that this war indeed will go down as mostly psychological and economic from here out. The American strategy is absolutely regime change. It's absolutely to eliminate the threats that come out of all this diplomacy and all of this chatter, back channel, infrastructure, drama, conflict that goes on. And that's why right away you see the globalists trying all of this stuff, that we don't have a plan, that there's no plan. And Lyle Leibovitz says, I'm part of making fun of Anne Applebaum here in the Atlantic, right? Because that's where you're going to start to hear these psychological, we don't have a plan, we need democracy, and we need diplomacy to reign. And Lyle Leibovitz says, hi, I'm part of the group of people who have been getting everything wrong for the last 70 years. And now that an American president exercised American power and won, I'm very troubled. Please read my essay in the magazine for fellow whiny losers. So that hopefully doesn't work. You're seeing some of the Iranian strategy, like I said, is about certainly suing for peace and diplomacy. Some people out there saying that there's going to be new weapons coming out. Could be. Here's something people are talking about: sinking the carrier, the nuclear option of prestige. The ultimate carrier killer missiles are already in place, and Iran is saving them for the moment that will freak out the American military complex. Pepe Escobar argues that sinking a U.S. aircraft carrier would be the symbolic end of the American superpower era for the global South. Well, I'm not sure there ever was an American superpower era. It was something else, clearly, with British involvement and all of this architecture of deceit being at play. But here's his prediction.
How capable is Iran in, I wouldn't say sinking, but at least damaging the Lincoln or the Ford?
They can. They can. And they are saving it for the right moment, because this is something that will freak out the American industrial military complex from A to Z. This is the nuclear option, much more than Hormuz. Can you imagine sinking a U.S. aircraft carrier? Because
How would they
let's
do
look
it?
at this.
Is it would be hypersonic?
Let's look at the symbology, Mario. That's the end of the American superpower. Period. For the whole global South. Obviously, the Chihuahuas in Europe will come up with some sort of stupid explanation out of Brussels, but this is what the 90% of the planet will see it. They could use equivalents that they already have of the Chinese carrier killer missiles, and they have Iranian versions. And don't forget that the southern shore, from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman, all that stretch from Bandar Abbas to Chabahar, all the way to the Iran-Pakistani border. I traveled that area a few months ago, for instance. It's crammed with Iranian missiles pointing to the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. Obviously, that explains why they.
So he's saying they can. I agree. There's a way to take the aircraft carriers down, but not on this day. And here's what we know from this Iranian strategy. So apparently, this is what people are saying. Like he's saying, they're saving the big missiles for the right time. Maybe, but there's other weapons that the Iranians haven't seen either. So here's Health Ranger saying Iran's war strategy is fairly straightforward. Blind U.S. forces by taking out radar installations, then fire low-cost, low-end missiles and drones at various targets to deplete U.S. air defense interceptors. Once U.S. air defense batteries run out of ammunition, then Iran will launch the larger, more dangerous hypersonic missiles or even ballistic missiles. And this is the infographic, full article coming tomorrow. So number one here, phase one, Iran's war strategy: blind, deplete, overwhelm. Target radar nodes. So that looks like it's what's happened so far. Number two, deplete, get all the expensive Tomahawks to be fired. And it's true, we have seen new weapons come with all kinds of distractions and countermeasures, and they launch multiple missiles once they get into range of the interceptors to confuse. So far, so good. And then he says stage 3, overwhelm. When everything's there, they start launching the heavy payload ballistic hypersonics. Maybe, but we've already got this, and this apparently is real. Apparently, this video here shows the plan coming into a bit of a severe problem in that they're not even using interceptor missiles. They unveiled that the Iron Dome has a laser version. I need it for the kites. Here's what we know. This is apparently lasers hitting the actual missiles as they come. That's what people are saying. Israel just shot rockets with a laser. Yes, a laser. Israel's Iron Beam system reportedly made its combat debut overnight, zapping Hezbollah rockets and drones out of the sky. No interceptor missiles, no billion-dollar fireworks, just concentrated light at the speed of physics. Cost per shot, basically electricity. If this is true, then that whole strategy goes up in smoke and doesn't really work. If they can change the economics of it, then that will have a big effect on how the war actually plays out. Now, these are the ones they say that they're deploying. These are the ones that have the separate payloads that come out to confuse, but with lasers, of course, that wouldn't make a difference. These images tell you everything the Pentagon briefings will not. What you are looking at is an Iranian ballistic re-entry vehicle escorted by a swarm of penetration aids, decoys engineered to simultaneously exhaust and blind every layer of the defensive stack. Patriot in the terminal phase, THAAD in the upper atmosphere, Arrow 3 in space. This is a purpose-built solution to a specific problem, and the problem Iran was solving was the entire architecture Washington spent hundreds of billions of dollars constructing and sold the world the lie that these systems are impenetrable. capacity is already dangerously low, and after last June, and interceptors are being consumed faster than they can be manufactured. Penetration aids don't need to defeat the shield, they only need to empty it. The weapons the world has never seen were not a boast. They were a technical briefing delivered at re-entry velocity. Stay tuned for what comes next. Carrier killers may be coming at the next phase. We'll see. Again, no one knows if these carrier killers work. Boats can move, of course, and that's not so simple. And so a lot of this now does come down to the Iranian military's capacity to wait this out and to pivot and manage the loss of leadership. And then Americans also have to have no new weapons themselves, or the Israelis or whoever else. So is that going to be the case? Like I said, if those lasers are real and they change the economics of waiting it out, and even if they're not, there's going to be a propaganda campaign, even if those lasers are fake, which they very well might be. But it will still have its psychological effect and should be able to sway folks. Because here's Professor Charles Xavier saying, for those who cannot understand the Iranian military, there are two parts: the regular force and the IRCG. The best analogy I can come up with is that the regular forces, like militaries everywhere, are like the Wehrmacht in World War II. The IRCG is more like the SS/Gestapo. These are not Germans. They are Iranians. And that means they are sloppy and poorly coordinated and filled with fractious cells and secret back-channel communication. Now, if this upsets your ethnic sensibilities, sorry, but I think that's true. The Nazis had a lot of discipline. I'm not sure the Iranian military does. How the hell do you think Mossad was able to locate the position of major leadership? But there is a difference. The military will soon flip once the pain gets to a certain level. But the IRCG, just like the SS, are true believers. Problem is, they are not true believers with order in the ranks. They're more structured agents of chaos, and their leadership faces the classic Nazi high command problem of being held accountable for their crimes against humanity and their own people once the fighting stops. It's about a 2-to-1 ratio of regulars to IRCG. Much will depend on getting the lower ranks in the IRCG to flip, with some kind of call to amnesty, because the top cohort is going down. The beauty of the decapitation strategy is that their top regular military leaders are being killed, so it's turning into a no-win situation not to make a deal with the US, and that increases the pressure on the military to quickly co-opt IRCG members before they themselves are killed. Stay tuned. The clock is running. Anyone that believes, though, that the Islamic Republic leadership is going to regain control and spread wider war is an absolute idiot. They simply don't understand Persian culture, which does not map to Western Teutonic leadership standards. And I think that is true. You're going to see a lot of flip-flopping. And indeed, just like people said, the U.S. military announces it has sunk an Iranian ship. Noam Bloom here reminds everyone Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz as only worrisome statement in a reality where we don't just sink Iranian ships at will. And whatever extent it was closed, it was American. So here we see from cynical Publius, Iranian leadership decapitated. Iranians restore a secular government that is not trying to raise the hidden imam. 3, absent funding to Hamas and Hezbollah, the Arab-Israeli conflict ends. 4, Abraham Accords in full force across the region. That is, to me, the biggest and most important story from the weekend, is that the Abraham Accords have been able to predict the structure of the war over the last 2 days. And seeing the Gulf Coast states hit so violently and hard by Iran, I think only hardens the Abraham Accords and has Israelis fighting alongside Saudis very shortly. Unlike some of our stupider adventures in places like Somalia and Iraq, this one has clear objectives and a well-defined outcome, all without boots on the ground or an enduring U.S. military commitment. explained. Indeed, here, 6 years ago, in the aftermath of the Soleimani killing, I participated in a joint conference tasked with planning for war scenarios with Iran. My unit was asked to advise the Air Force on the integration of Marine Corps HIMARS into potential combat operations in the Straits of Hormuz. The conference was relatively brief and very much preliminary. At the time, I thought the whole thing was a farce. Many of the other planners were eager for conflict, but I correctly believe the likelihood of a wider conflict at the time was very low. One conversation, however, stands out to me. In a breakout session, one of the consultants, a retired lieutenant colonel, started going on about how we were going to crush the Iranians in a potential war. Mind you, he was overweight, dressed in a too tight polo, and eating chips out of a bag when he said this. It occurred to me that there was no we here. In a war, men like that would be sitting into the rear, fat and happy, going home to their wife and kids every night. We didn't mean him, it meant me and my men. War is not a game, it is existential. The stakes are always high. Serious men do not bloviate about war. What bothered me most about the conference, that bothered me most about my military service as a whole, was the lack of connection between means and ends. No one ever asked what war was supposed to accomplish. We were just discussing. Hold on, I wanted to see you. Indeed, here, America as a global policeman has been uniformly bad for our national character. It has been profoundly expensive, resulted in a massive expansion of taxation and state power, and an enormous loss of life. There were and are better alternatives. My goal now for the past several years has been to try and make arguments for a better way. I have had some success, but obviously not as much as I would like. It is what it is. There is much more work to be done. The current conflict offers an opportunity for serious men to reflect, to plan our future. It opens the problems anew. But like I said, the potential for peace and removing this architecture is important because it's now completely in the realm of psychology at home, psychology abroad, and economic incentives as well. So Konstantin Kisin saying it's the third time World War III has broken out in a year, and as many smart people have predicted, we're all going to die like the last two times. It's been a pleasure knowing you all, and I hope to see you in the afterlife, or just back here tomorrow reading the same panic slop. Indeed, here. And remember Christian Hines saying the same thing. If you look at early newspapers from the first week of August 1914, almost everyone in the US believed that Germany had invaded the Netherlands and Switzerland, and the largest naval battle in history was taking place off the coast of New England, despite the fact that none of these things were true. And he says this tweet is not about World War I. And we're seeing more and more that that is indeed the case, because here's the domestic psychological aspect. Trump voters dancing in the streets, Venezuelans dancing in the streets, Iranians dancing in the streets, Democrats. Indeed, here's everyone celebrating over the weekend. Iranian women celebrating their freedom, American women protesting it. Many images like this, many contrasts were shared. Drew Pavlu, who's in some of this stuff, or no, a different guy, sorry. Hey, I murked Ayatollah Khamenei. Oh my God, yay. Here they do the she's not interested meme, and pretty good one indeed. Getting rid of some of these. And, you know, with the psychological operations, of course, you're seeing everyone online. Oh, America's doing Israel's bidding. That's a big part of this psychological conflict. War Clandestine says, I can't really prove it, but I think all the Israel derangement syndrome we've seen over the past few years has been a coordinated psyop to preemptively damage support for Israel in the US, because enemy knew this day would come. The deep state knew Trump and Israel planned to wipe out Khamenei, his regime, and their proxies in the Middle East. So they targeted Trump's supporters with massive amounts of bots and propaganda, which was designed to condition them to hate Israel and hate Trump. The Israel obsession was a trap, and it worked on many. Something like that's been going on. I mean, you can see it here. Here's Nick Fuentes just yesterday with all this stuff, crying again, do not vote in the midterms. Vote Democrat. The administration needs to be shut down. This stuff. Not that much. I'm not a big Mark Levin fan, but I remember listening to Mark Levin on a drive. I took a drive the day after Trump won his nomination. I drove back. I was in New York, as I've told you that story many times, with Patrick Byrne, and we were at an early Bitcoin thing. It was May 2nd, I think, 2016. And I've told you many times I was invited to Trump Tower that night for a party to celebrate Trump's nomination because he'd sewed up Texas. And I decided not to go, of course, as I've mentioned many times. But the following day, I drove back to Toronto because I was still in Toronto somewhat. And my wife and I drove back. And I listened to the radio for most of the way. And I remember listening to Mark Levin's radio show that day. He was all in on Trump, and that was when he was a candidate. So you can see these examples of, you can see these examples. I completely disagree with that. So I see architecture of deceit. I see a strategy where we've seen the funding of all the brainwashing get taken apart. We've seen the architecture that would go into brainwashing people over the last few months get ripped apart. We're seeing the financial incentives change. We're seeing huge amounts of energy continue to get changed. Venezuela, all that stuff, really important stuff. We're seeing everything, the subordination of the Federal Reserve, a completely new financial and economic system. We're seeing all of that take shape. Now, it's true what he's saying here, that there's people that weren't around in 2016 that are suddenly centrist here, and that is part of the problem. Park McDougald here says it. A lot of leftists who got red-pilled during COVID and filled the ranks of the online right forgot or never understood in the first place that Trump was the man who turned Soleimani into a smoking crater. And indeed, there were plenty of World War III memes at the time. Then he said 10/7 and Ukraine would never have happened under him. He meant Iran and Russia would have been scared of him, not that he was a peacenik. Add to this the influence of Dime Square, mostly ex-leftists adopting multipolar Z-pilled politics as a countercultural pose, and you get a lot of confusion over things that aren't actually confusing. It's true. I mean, Trump is always, he's been consistent. He's never been he's for no forever wars, but he's been threatening Iran and the mullahs since 2015. He said it many times in 2015 and 2016. This isn't out of nowhere. But what you are seeing here is, I think, Trump's plan, not Netanyahu's plan, not Israel's plan. You're seeing Trump's plan. And Trump's plan was to bring all of these participants together. I don't think that Israel and Netanyahu wanted Qatar involved. I don't think he said, let's get UAE involved. I don't even think they thought they could get Saudi involved. And of course, they would say yes to Saudi being involved because it's Saudi. But whose plan is it to get all these people together? Was it Netanyahu's plan to make a Abraham Accord coalition? No, of course not. It's been Trump's plan from the first term. And so if you see this as Trump trying to change financial systems, you don't need to hallucinate any Israel stuff. You don't need to. Everything is very clearly explained that Israel, like the Middle East, like the rest of the Middle East, has been entangled in its own proxy civil war of systems. And this proxy civil war of systems are the same fight we see in America with the sludge people and the left and the brainwashers and the institutions that are all corrupted by fake money. Here you can see the universities, right? Here's some college, Dearborn Community College guy crying about what Iranians are going to do now that this has happened. And he's talking about what's happening in colleges. I can't listen to too much of this guy. He's a college professor. We are going to hold his blood and ideology and teach it to our children. I don't think it's going to work out for you. I mean, these institutions are just failing, and that's been the fight. All of this architecture to get to this point, Trump had to change a million things already. And universities are one of them. Look what he did yesterday. Hegseth has banned military from attending Princeton, Columbia, and other elite universities. He says wokeness is weakness. So did Israel tell Trump to do that? Was this a Jewish ploy? Of course not. Trump is systematically going after this infrastructure. He's systematically trying to create the architecture of peace that can fight against the architecture of deceit. It's a system. And like we see with Epstein, he was part of this architecture of deceit. He was infrastructure. And so swapping out infrastructure is important. And you have to have something in place. You have to have a replacement in place. So they might not have a person in mind to take over Iran, but they have a global system in mind. And that global system is important to recognize, because all of this system is what gave us this perception that America was already in decline, and that was part of the framing. And that is what Trump is fighting against. It's a golden age framework. It is optimism versus all of this sluggish pessimism. Country Highway says much the same here when he says, what if we weren't a nation in decline, but in fact far more powerful than we dare to imagine? What if the images of weakness, insane conspiracy theories, and recycled political failures of the past century that we were being fed from both the left and the right represent the last-ditch efforts of our enemies to divide and control us, because they know that otherwise they've lost the handle? What if we could build a better future together over the next 5 years, using the unique strengths of our own culture, that's the American system, combined with new technologies that gave us unrivaled power to deter our enemies, cure diseases, eat healthier food, and live freer, better, and more interesting lives? Imagine what would happen if Americans focused on our strengths and our enormous capacity for progress instead of the personal selfishness, political hatreds, and ideological insanity. It starts with respecting the rights and freedoms that make this country the most powerful engine of human progress that the world has ever seen. Or we can choose to be divided and miserable. But that's what Trump has worked on since he came into power. You've got to have a complete and total American system to replace this decrepit system. That means money, that means communications, that means various incentives and a worldview that comes along with all of this. And so that's really the fight that we're seeing here. That's why all of these proxies, as you can see, it's not so simple as well, right? What we saw in Venezuela, what we saw there already, we're seeing how it's connected to these stories. Here, Iranian sleeper agents have infiltrated the US. Now, ex-FBI boss warns of imminent terror attacks on American soil and exactly how they will strike. So here, Joshua Reed says, very true, the proxy networks extends into cartels. Imagine that. So again, you can see the order of affairs. Trump had to go after the NGOs and that part of the architecture of deceit. Then he had to go after the cartels. He had to send the military into various American cities to break up all of these different potential sleeper cells that are across the country. And there are probably many of these sleeper cells. But now you can start to see why Venezuela had to go first and this one came after, because this isn't just a forever war thing. This is a global systemic change that we're talking about here. Joshua Steinman talks about these risks here. He says, how many foreign sabotage teams are operating on US soil? I ask it a lot here on X, but this week's events are going to catalyze reality and give us some sense of the answer. In advance, here is my analysis on how to think about what is coming. He says, first off, when we say sabotage teams, I'm not only talking about shooters, I'm talking about finance assets, logistics assets, intelligence assets, operations assets. Let's discuss each one. He says foreign finance assets illicitly, plus sometimes illicitly, facilitate financial activities that further advance adversary activities, smuggling, fencing stolen goods, owning, operating businesses that can launder money, and that's what the global criminal stuff has been about. Is that's how they've been laundering the money. Iran and Venezuela were combined in that way. Foreign logistics assets enable activity by doing things like purchasing and maintaining safe houses, enabling movement of clandestine individuals, acquiring resources necessary for operations. Intelligence and operational assets are fairly self-explanatory. They are the folks at the top of the sphere, at the tip of the spear, conducting what we call operational activity. My guess, Iranian leadership has already or will imminently transmit guidance to these worldwide assets, not only in the US, but also in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Probably something close to you are cleared to engage. You're cleared hot to engage. At that point, these cells will begin planning. As I said above, not every cell will be planning one or more attacks. Those plans might be things like, let's go buy guns and ammo, or we need to collect information on potential targets, and so on. But the kinetic cells will begin the attack planning. It's also possible through less likely that these groups already have pre-planned attacks, have already staged resources, or have everything ready. But I would be surprised if that was the case. So over the next few weeks, we're going to see a spike in surveillance and logistics activities. The patterns of behavior these individuals had prior are likely to change. New routes to work, new purchasing patterns, unexplained travel. This also coincides with the left's mobilization, which we saw start on Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these Iranian assets were in fact embedded with American leftist organizations using protests and similar activity to mask their actions, which is why all this ICE stuff had to happen first, which is why there's an order to this stuff. Reprisals could happen as soon as 1 to 2 weeks, but 1 to 2 months is more likely for a few reasons. First, Iran doesn't have total control over these assets. They're going to see which way the wind blows. If the regime collapses, they'll fade away, happy to be in America. Second, there's a wide range of potential targets, both military and civilian. It's going to take time to plan and execute. For my friends in law enforcement, stay frosty. Ping your federal colleagues immediately to ask for support. In the 9/11 after action, we found out that the hijackers had been flagged as suspicious but slipped through the cracks. See something, say something. And for the feds, move on to warfitting. Conduct an immediate review of investigations from the last 10 years with a nexus to Iran and or associated government and non-government entities. Chase down leads, follow up with sources, scan the intel systems today. So we got issues. Got to watch out. Definite danger of all that. Now, again, go back to the Venezuela story, because the connections to Venezuela and Iran are China and energy access. And I think that's where you really get to see the economics play out and why this is important. Crimea says, as of 2 days ago, the opening up of Venezuela seems to be going all right. They're welcoming U.S. officials and businesses and pushing through legal reforms to let America access their oil, among other things. So here's what we know. She's received the new chief of the mission in Caracas, the head of the CIA, and the chief of the U.S. military command responsible for Latin America and the Caribbean. The U.S. Treasury has eased a 7-year-old oil embargo on Venezuela as part of Washington's bid to boost oil production in the country with the world's largest proven reserves of crude. In recent weeks, it has issued licenses allowing a handful of multinationals to operate in Venezuela under certain conditions. In the State of the Union address Tuesday, Trump said the United States has received more than 80 million barrels of oil from Venezuela, our new friend and partner. Under pressure from Washington, Rodriguez pushed through a major reform of the country's hydrocarbon laws, opening up the sector to private and foreign investments. And that's important because, of course, China needs the energy, and China will have a big role to play in how much escalation the Iranians are going to see through. Now, again, my prediction is the United States will allow them to continue to exploit Iranian oil and to go get Iranian oil as long as they're okay with leadership change. That'll be the only condition for China to keep the oil flowing. And I think they're going to take it because they need the oil. Now, people will say, oh, China has so much energy. You see Elon Musk saying that today. China is rapidly moving to solar and electric future with very little need for oil and gas. But it's important to see where Elon is missing the truth here about the solar power in China. Willis Eskenbach here says, on the left is what Elon wants you to think is happening. So here's the solar energy of China, right? This is how much consumption of solar, it's gone way up, right? It was nothing, and then 2010, 2012, and then bang, it's gone through the roof. But here's the truth, right? Yellow line is the same data on both graphs. Here you see the actual total energy consumption of China. It's gone like this. So they are amazingly successful with energy, but solar wasn't really part of the equation. It just depends on the scale at which you're judging. It's gone from a little to more, but in the grand scheme of things, solar is still not at the point where it can handle what is going on in the world. And you can't fight a war with solar power. You need real electricity or real combustion power. So everything that's going on here, I think, with Venezuela and Iran is about China. This should tell you starting a war in the Pacific is a really bad idea for communist China. Pay attention on how your SAM systems and radars failed in Venezuela and Iran. Understand we can do to Beijing what we are doing to Tehran anytime we want. And remember, with Russia's tanker fleet being hunted, Venezuela off the board, and the Iranian regime being removed, we decide what happens to that 60+% of your oil imports. And I'll take this opportunity to remind you that all three planned carriers cannot equal the number of sorties of one Nimitz-class carrier, let alone a Ford-class. And we both know what happens when U.S. Navy SSNs come for you in your coastal waters. You can rage all you want, but none of these realities will change. Rage on the internet all you want. You understand where the line is. And indeed, China says the U.S. is a war addict through its 240-year history, 250. It has been at war for about 16 years, all but 16 years. The U.S. has 800 overseas military bases in over 80 countries and regions. The U.S. is the main cause of international disorder, global turbulence, and regional instability. So indeed, China is the most important subject here when it comes to that, and it looks like it's going to be very difficult. And indeed, here, the no plan folks having a lot of trouble. Topple Iran and Venezuela, and that's 20% of China's oil energy supply. China will have to turn more to Russia for cheap oil, remove El Mencho cartel leader in Mexico, and you get rid of the criminals, taxing 15% off the top of U.S.-Mexico trade. That is all critical to U.S. plan to decouple from China. The actions we're seeing over the past week are connected. The U.S. is implementing a grand strategy designed to weaken China's position. The goal is, if China moves on Taiwan in the next 2 years, they will do so without support in the Middle East, without proxy cartels in Mexico, and without a Russia able to launch any attacks on NATO. The U.S. goal is to focus 100% on the Pacific in the next 2 years. I don't exactly agree with 100% on the Pacific. I just think they need to get back to a point where they can have bilateral negotiations with China in such a way that it's just about commercial competition. Commercial competition, I don't think the Americans mind. The solar industry, nuclear industry, all those things will be natural for the United States and China to compete against each other in. But I continue to believe that China is just as interested in ending the British theater of war and war theatrics, I should say, is a better way to describe it, than the other way around. So indeed, oh, I missed no audio. Jeez Louise. Why does the no audio happen sometimes? Which one was it with the no audio? Yeah, you didn't want to hear that guy anyway. He was no good. I read it. Now, here's some of the fun things. So I'll just reiterate before I go on. So I think that with regime change here, but not a long war, that the United States will probably have the leverage to get the regime change in Iran, and that Iran needs England to get involved. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that Trump is going to listen to them. The Abraham Accords are the more important allies now, which is why I've been telling you that America's most important allies are Saudi Arabia and Japan for other reasons. But the two most important allies right now that the United States has are Saudi Arabia and Japan, both of which are involved in their own ways in the conflict that's happening. I do believe you're going to see Russia join with the United States with peace because they've seen what just happened to that leadership. So I do think Russia already talking about its own incentives for peace. Now, attention goes back to Ukraine after this, because if these globalists are really cornered, it is Zelensky who is their last choice. So you're going to see him. He's already laughing about getting a nuclear bomb. So there's a little more to do to get rid of this architecture of deceit. But it's getting closer. Now, in the case of the Iranians, I don't think their missile strategy here of holding back the good stuff is going to work out for them. I think lots of good stuff hasn't been shown in the war yet, and it's still possible that they can knock out an aircraft carrier. Sure, it remains to be seen, but it's possible. It's not the kind of aircraft carrier neutralization that I predicted. I predicted the kind that's inexpensive. A hypersonic weapon is very expensive. So it's not quite the same logic. I still think if the boats would get too close, if the carriers got too close to the Strait of Hormuz and the little drones, they'd be in bigger trouble. That's why they're stuck in the Mediterranean and not coming out into the Strait of Hormuz or anything like that. The Yemen situation is also what they're avoiding for that reason. Yeah, sorry, there's no Strait of Hormuz does not have the drone risks from the Gulf Coast side, from the Iranian side, certainly. So where does it all lead? I think that the powers that could save Iran are calculating right now and are saying probably not going to work out. So I know Trump yesterday gave a 4-week plan, but he's given all kinds of different time frames to everyone. I think that's just deliberate misinformation being put out there. It's important that time frames are there. We don't want mission creep at all in this thing. But again, seeing the Abraham Accords work, watching the Iranians lose their allies and watching their allies lose the capacity to participate in economic or psychological changes, I just don't think you're going to see China that interested, and America still controls enough of their oil that they'll have to reconsider exactly what goes on. Because I think just like you see peace through construction being a very clear idea inside of the Board of Peace, China also will be offered all kinds of financial incentives. So it's not just about weakening China, it's about making sure China grows in a healthy way. And I think that involves indeed infrastructure to Russia and Iran, but not this version of Iran, not the version of Iran that's still under British influence. And so getting rid of this architecture, getting rid of these incentives is the most important thing. Now, what do we predict going forward? Well, I think it might be over sooner than a lot of people are considering. Now, one of the reasons I think that is purely astrological. Of course, I've been telling you that we've been on this systemic change with the, going back from Sam Bankman-Fried on the lunar eclipse in 2022, related to the Jane Street story, of course, that we heard about last week with the Terra Luna collapse in June 2022. And then, of course, last year we had the predicted closing price and the triggering of the fourth turning when we had the January 2025 lunar eclipse, the first one we'd had since the 2022 lunar eclipse. Now there's another one tomorrow night, and it has all kinds of incredible, weird coincidences. So I'm going to go out on a limb and just say, because of the moon and stuff, the war might be over today. I'm not sure, or tomorrow, today or tomorrow. I have no other information other than this. Martyr Maid reminds us. All right, now attack Iran. They're using my favorite meme template these days, of course, the Truman Show director. All the world, of course, is a stage. All right, now attack Iran during Purim. Purim is like it's almost like Halloween in the Jewish religion. The Jewish holiday celebrating the massacre of 75,000 Persians. Start the attack on the 11th day of the 9th month on the Muslim calendar, so it's 9/11. But sir, We don't want to cause people to reconsider who was responsible for 9/11. Do it. Make sure Purim coincides with a blood moon that peaks at 3:33 a.m. on 3/3. So that's tonight. We have the lunar eclipse tonight. But sir, I know 3 is a highly significant number in Jewish Kabbalah, symbolizing the third party ending an unresolvable conflict between 1 and 2. Now do it, but have a Jewish journalist publish an article admitting how significant the symbols is and comparing Iran to Amalek. So that looks like is what's happening. It looks like we're going to have a full moon tonight and maybe a new world tomorrow. And weirdly, the next lunar eclipse will be on New Year's Eve next year. So New Year's Eve is the one after this. So just incredible stuff. And you can see the architecture of the new world is already here, right? This is an economic war, an economic and psychological war. And just look at what America has already built. 60% of top US banks are building Bitcoin products. 90% of Barron's top 50 RIA firms have a Bitcoin allocation. 52% of top 25 hedge funds have a Bitcoin allocation. The institutional adoption timeline is accelerating fast. And a new world is coming. A new world is accelerating fast. And all of these things will affect our healthcare. It's going to affect our building processes, the type of work we do. All of this new world is starting to come into focus. Here is Kennedy talking about health in America and big things coming soon. And you can see exactly why people are talking about a whole new world. I'm going to make sure we get the audio. We like the good audio on RFK here. He was on Joe Rogan on Friday, had a great interview. My wife listened to it. I listened to it on the side because
we need to make the system transparent. And that's, one of the things that we're doing. During his first term, Trump passed a transparency bill, but everybody wanted transparency. What we're doing now is we're going to make all of the hospitals and all the providers post a menu of their prices so that are available to everybody and that are available on a website that we're creating. We have a mock-up of this website. And I asked the question, how much does it cost in the hospitals within a mile of Manhattan to have a baby? One of them was, there were about 30 hospitals that I could visualize on one page. One of them was $1,300. That was the lowest. The highest was $22,000. In Detroit, it is the cheapest place to have a baby is about $5,000, and the most expensive is $60,000. And it's the same service, the same quality care. Nothing changes except that price. Why do we have that information chaos? We have it because the industry wants to hide what it's doing.
And that's just it. It's this kind of thinking that's got us in these troubles. And I mean, think of just having a baby and that there's no easy prices. I remember my wife got pregnant and we were in France and we were there for a few months. And so her first trimester was all in France. And I said, well, we got to get a doctor, we're pregnant, so we got to go figure this out. And I remember looking online and it was so easy to find. There's a national menu of prices for people who don't have insurance. So the way it works in France is everybody pays, and based on your income, you get reimbursed. So there's an upfront cost. And now there's, I guess, welfare cases and stuff probably don't have to pay anything upfront. Everybody else has to pay upfront, and then your insurers are the ones who get you your money back. And that's why you move your insurance based on customer service. So if you have better customer service, that's what keeps the insurers motivated to have good customer service, because they're just in the customer acquisition game. That's how they end up getting paid. So there's a fake private market in healthcare in France, in the sense that the government doesn't pay for you unless you're super rich. Then the government won't pay. So the government, or super poor. But if you're, like most people, then they will reimburse you, and you create the incentives and quality control by moving your money between different insurers if you don't like the customer service that you get. But you get to know what price you're supposed to pay for every service. There's like an online book that has every right. And so when I went for the ultrasound and everything, I knew how much I was paying beforehand. I just knew I wasn't getting reimbursed. And the prices were fine. They were really not that unaffordable. They were, I think the whole thing cost me $100, and that was the visit, the ultrasound, blood work, blah, blah, blah. It was really not that bad. So what he's talking about here is not just efficiency and pricing. It's a complete reorientation of economic systems. It's not something we even have anything, there's nothing like it right now. And so just seeing these new systems and understanding that we've got all of this trouble and that we're actually in a competing systems game should let us know that we're on the brink of something big and new and different. And it's really important because there's no way we can get to Save Act and fixing our election systems until we figure out most of these international entanglements that are screwing the economy, that are screwing the financial system, the brainwashing system, the messaging system, communications. All of these things are what have been degraded by the systems that are dying in front of our eyes. So this is certainly looking like the last days of the fourth turning, the last days of the dying system. I predict it comes to a head when Trump gets control of the Federal Reserve. So by May, I think we are in the good times. And by the time we get to USA 250 in July, I think we're very clearly at, and more people will see we're at the dawn of the golden age. I think this is just about the end. Like I said, I think China is going to make wise decisions in the next few weeks, and those decisions will allow China to be a full-fledged and incredible member of the global community, and will be able to get rich and make money and get oil from what's left of Iran if it turns back into Persia. But I do believe that the Chinese system and the American system will be competitive. I don't think conflict or competition ends. I just don't think it's this brainwashing and forced conflict and drama and theater and Sunni and Shia and Jewish and Israel controls America and all these crazy things. In the end, it's money. And we're changing financial systems, which is going to change incentive structures, which is going to change the type of brainwashing that's out there, and it's going to change the narrative supply chain, if you will. And so people are going to find some form of stasis after this. And we got to, because things are getting crazier. I mean, look at this. This is one of the wildest stories. I don't know if you guys saw this. No audio from that clip. Oh, no, that was the last one. I don't know. And this is why it couldn't come sooner. I mean, just look at this. This is one of the craziest stories. So everyone was paying attention to Jim Carrey this weekend. He gave some, got some award. He spoke in French, and everyone was like, come on, that's fake. And it turns out it was fake. It looks like a makeup artist, Alexis Stone, posted on Instagram where he revealed that he disguised himself as Jim Carrey for a social experiment. People notice the eye color difference and the facial difference and all that stuff. People said, oh, he got a facelift. It's just facelift. No, apparently it was a mask. And just to show how good these masks are and how good that technology has gotten. So the architecture of deceit dying at the exact right time, because who wants to live in a world with all these crazy masks? Mission Impossible stuff. Hell Stew says Heather on Wednesday. No, Heather tomorrow. I made a mistake when I said Heather was coming Wednesday. The 3rd is tomorrow, so I had texted her about the 3rd because that's when the eclipse was happening. So she'll be here tomorrow. So Wednesday, my mistake. It'll be there tomorrow. Sagane Sank on Sank, you fail audio today. Did I fail again? No, RFK was on, right? You guys heard RFK, I believe. I think you guys saw that. So yeah, Heather will be here tomorrow. Sagane Sank on Sank says, Country Highway, great paper that I'm thinking about subscribing to. I would definitely subscribe to it, Sagane Sank on Sank. Real paper to hold, indeed. And Sagane Sank on Sank says, 1776 finally getting fully implemented. That is what we are trying to do here. This is all about yeah, I heard RFK. That's what I thought. Job description: have fun making money. Have money making fun times. Presto Bitcoin, indeed, exactly. Bitcoin mooning, is it? Well, I think it's just mooning because of the moon science that's going on, but I think that's what's up. Hassan says, all the Fox Noon boomers I know are so pumped about this war. They sure are. Go Israel and America. Loud and clear. In honor of Kashmir Pulaski. The plan is not having a plan. Been noticing there a pattern here. Ethnic sensitivities shattered. Yeah, you got to do it sometimes. Free your mind and your body will follow. That's what's up. That's what's up. Very good. Let the good times roll. Indeed. Audio okay here. He's capturing and eliminating the key players swiftly. Indeed. So much winning. Is Iran attacking all of global homo friends in the Middle East? Familia Diaz. How does Bitcoin benefit from this situation? Well, I didn't like Familia Diaz putting that into words because truthfully, it does benefit from war in this case. So I didn't want to say that out loud because you don't want to incentivize any of that. But did they think this was going to be Venezuela Part 2? I don't think we know what they were thinking. What I do think is that, no, I mean, it's 90 million people, so it's much bigger than Venezuela. I don't think they expected anything. And the brainwashing, much more efficient. It's a real country. Venezuela was not a real country. It's completely fake, right? And Persia is not, or Iran is not that. So I don't think anyone believed it was going to be simple. I think what was important was that Trump had firm commitments from the region and the Abraham Accords folks, and that the final leg of this British architecture would be coming down. So I think all of that meant that they would have a larger obstacle to traverse. So that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing. Seaberger Nolan, glad I wasn't in Dubai this weekend. Yeah, me too. You must spend so much time prepping for these shows. It's greatly appreciated. Smash the like. We love the likes. We love the smashing. How much time do I spend preparing? Well, what I do is my method is pretty simple. I'm on, I like to read the news in the morning anyway. So Mondays are a little harder because I save too many stories over the weekend. So my supply of stories are great. I don't do any news at night. So at night I'm on YouTube, which can be news, but I tend to not listen to news at night. I might flip on Twitter for a minute, but if I find myself getting anxiety or whatever, or into the stories and scrolling like I want the dopamine from what's next, what else can I find, then I back out and I say, no, I'm not doing that because it'll keep me awake and it'll keep me, it'll waste my evening type of thing. So after you put the kids to bed, I might flip through some stories, but not much. I'll do a little bit in the afternoon. But really, I wake up at around 4 or 5 in the morning, and my kids will get up at 6:30. So I've got an hour and a bit to save stories, and then I go and help my kids with breakfast when they wake up, and just spend a bit of time with them right when they wake up. And then I will usually make their breakfast for them and get them started on their math and some of their homeschool stuff. And then I should be sitting down exactly 2 hours before the show. So 9 a.m., I should be sitting down by 7 a.m. And then I just do this trick where I just write a note for all the tweets that I've liked over the past morning or a little bit the day before. And I'll put them on one page. I just open my notebook. I'll show you what they look like. As an example, let's see here. probably an older one, but I'll take notes. Yeah, I like this. This is probably from last week. I'll make a page here of just notes, and then I put them in order here. And then that should go quick. The thing that takes me time is putting the tabs in order. So I need to start that 1 hour before the show. So usually if I get the order, like I said, I'll start at 2 hours before the show. I'll write all the notes. That should only take me about 10, 15 minutes. I'll usually see the pattern in the order, and then I'll put them in order. And then I'll maybe take a break, have another coffee, talk to my family, hang out, see what's going on in the house. And then I'll sit down exactly 1 hour before. And if I have to sit down 1 hour before, because it's all the tedious stuff. It's like put the windows up or the tabs up, load the show, and then I'm ready. You know, the tedious stuff, the stuff I don't like, is loading the show and getting the tabs. But the tabs are necessary. I in a 2 hour scenario, remember when I used to do it without the notes? I can only really do that for 40 minutes to an hour. A little harder with 2 hours. So I need the notes because there's a little more stuff that we cover in this way. So the notes are important for that. So there you go. All right, folks, we're done here. You're going to have the Bitcoin, State of Bitcoin up next with Borja. Let me see who's on the show. We've got Rob Wallace will be on the show, and we've got Alexandre Lezette from Plan B, and we've got, I think, Corey Klippenstein. Is that true? Is Corey from Swan on? Maybe. I see Corey K. I think that's Corey. So there you go. Cedric Youngelman and Frank Corva will be on Hank's show this afternoon. So plenty of great guests coming up this afternoon on Roxham TV. So in a second, I'm going to play the logo followed by the thanks for watching screen. I just want to say to you, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow, everybody.